We're here.
Great. Okay. So the next paper is by Valerio Massimo Minale. Yes. Hello. I can see you.
Yes. Is it possible to hear me, to see me?
Yes. 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 We do see you very clearly. Milena, I'm sorry, works on at the classic department of Naim Bas. This is the right paper?
Yes, yes.
Because it says here she and
I was part of the previous.
Sorry. I do not have any way to present you. I just got this one for the. Sorry about this. I do not have know how to present you, but I think that you could say some words on yourself. I'm sorry about it. There is lack of communication. In any case, I am very, very delighted to invite you to speak about the subject of the frankincense trade during late Roman Empire, elements of a legal regulation. Thank you very much, and sorry about this.
Yes. Hello. For the first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this Congress. And I'm particularly proud to give my simple contribution for the Israeli Society of the Promotion of Classical Studies. And moreover, in my workplace in the State University of Napoli, where I teach Roman law and Byzantine law, I'm in charge for the scientific agreements with the Israeli universities. So for me, it's particularly important to be here, and it is a pity, of course, to be here only virtually. But I think this is I hope this is the last present of this pandemic. I hope. I hope you have received the handout and the text of the of my contribution, in particular the handout. So the title is, I've chosen several titles. The final title is Frankincense Trade in Roman Law and Roman Law in Roman Law. So all we know that how existed a Silk Road between China and between Rome and China, and of course across the Persian Empire. So existed a frankincense one, connected with the Arabian world and in turn across the Nabatean kingdom. The history of that trade, coming from southern Arabia and in particular from the Dhofar region, where the plant of the Boswellia had their natural habitat, and reaching, thanks to the caravans, part the harbor of Leuke-Kome on the Red Sea and part the city of Petra, is a well-known history. As well is known that one concerning the marketplaces of the Negev desert, so the cities of Avdat, Shifta, Mamshit, together with Haluza. Petra, especially, was put under the Roman rule between the conquest realized by Trajan in 106 and the terrible earthquake of 363, which destroyed the Nabatean capital. Sure enough, from Petra started the last section of the famous road Via Nuova Traiana. Less famous is the city of Madain Salih, called in Greek Hegra, and placed in the Saudi region of Hejaz, but anyway, absolutely relevant for the knowledge of the frankincense route. I've put a map in the handout. There is a map to check all these places. Another important arriving point for the caravans of the camels, real ships of deserts, was the center of Gaza, while during the biblical times, such a role had been played by the port of Ophir. Probably these roads were in some way linked with the Indian Sea spice route, finishing to the old harbor of Charax-Spasinu, placed on the top of the Persian Gulf. And an unavoidable source for us about this kind of economic environment is still today the Periplus Maris Erythraei, wherein we find another legendary place, the present Socotra, at the time Dioscorides, an island rich of scented resins. The western center of distribution on the other side was Alexandria in Egypt. There arrived the way of water represented by the Nilus River and coming especially from Coptos, in turn connected with the southern port of the Red Sea, mainly Myos Ormos, together with Berenike. In Greek, incense was tsuodes or tsuon. Tsuon was the tree, and tsuos was its aroma. Tsumiao was the verb indicating to burn the incense. In Latin, the term, never at plural, was tus, with or without h, tus turis, while mica, or mainly turum, indicated the granule of the incense, so the single part. Incensum, instead, was the past participle of the verb incendo, incendere, to burn. From the term tus, we have several other names. Turibulum, censer, turificatio, offering incense, turificator, idolater in a Christian meaning, turificatus, a Christian who offer incense to the gods, that is to say, a traitor. We have adjectives, so turalis, made for the incense, turarius, concerning the incense, but incense seller if name and not adjective, tureus, made of incense, turicremus, burning of incense, turifer, producing incense, turilegus, gathering incense, and finally verbs, especially turifico, turificare, to offer incense. So a whole world of concepts. The mirra, the precious present given to Jesus by the Magi, as well the incense itself, was an aromatic resin too, coming from the plant of Cammifora. Moreover, the benzoin had the same aspect and function. The bdellium, instead, an aromatic gum, came from the port of Barbaricum at the mouth of the river Indus. Among the Roman writers, in particular, Plinius the Elder wrote in his Historia Naturali, precisely in the 6th and in the 12th book, something interesting concerning the frankincense trade and its land of origin. Correctly, the Roman historian says that the Sabaeans were simple middlemen for the trade of the frankincense, without falling into the same mistake made, for example, by Strabo in his Geographica. He records that the abortive campaign promoted by Augustus and led by Aelius Gallus, who assaulted Mary in 24 before Christ, he informed us that the port of Muza after Mocha, near the present Aden, was the export center concerning the mirra, not the incense, and that the way to the north across the desert passed nisi per Gabbanitas, only through the Gabbanites, a quite mysterious population which could correspond to the Kitibano, or better the Kutabanians, and an Arab tribe. Their capital was called Tomna, the city of Timna of the Minians community, connected with the port of Ochelis, now Bab el Mandeb. So a geographical map given by Plinius the Elder. Actually, the economic environment of the frankincense was the Hadramite kingdom, which had its capital in the city of Shabwa. As we know, the Himarit one was placed more in the south of the present Yemenite region. So in the Yemenite region, we have the Hadramite kingdom and the Himyarit kingdom. Finally, coming back to the top of an imaginary map, to the Nabateans and to the Arabs who faced the border of the Roman Empire, we could stress the relevance of a permeable situation, essential for the import trades as well for the legal contacts. This is testified, for example, by the so-called scopelismon, a particular crime concerning the change of position of the boundary stones as attested by Ulpian in Digestum 47.11.9. So the scopelismon was a particular crime specifically connected with the Arab culture, but received in the Roman legal system. The aim of this quite short contribute will be simply to analyze 3 legal sources, which could be taken as useful examples in order to understand the value of the ancients in the Roman world. The sources refer respectively to the times of the Respublica, the Principatum, and the Dominatum. They will show us the religious character of the luxury god represented by the ancients. The first one is preserved in Digestum 33.939, and it is a passage taken from the 22nd book of on the bequests delegati by Ulpianus. I read only the English translation. You have in front of you the Latin text, I hope. The question is if the wood and the coal and the other things wherewith the penus is established must be considered into the bequest of the penus itself. Both Quintus Mucius and Ophelius decided in a negative sense. They said that those things had not to be considered as well the millstones. The same, they said, was for the ancients and the candles. Rutilius, instead, asserts that the wood and the coal had to be considered, but only if not destined to be sold. Sextus Cecilius, indeed, writes that also the ancients and the candles destined to the use of the house had to be considered in the bequest, in the legatus. The passage must be read with another one belonging to Aulus Gellius Noctes Actice 4.120. The passage says that concerning the penus, we have to add also that Servius Sulpicius has written in his critic to the chapters of Scaevola that Aelius Cato had thought to include exactly in the penus not only the things destined to be eaten and drunk, but the ancients and the candles too, because they were arranged for this purpose. The exegesis of the 2 passages is connected with the problem of the so-called legatus penus, which was a particular kind of bequest, very old and safeguarded by a sort of penalty put on the heir. The problem faced by Ulpian, who in turn evokes other famous jurists belonging to the ancient times, is the following. If in the penus must be considered the wood, the coal, the inches, and the wax for the candles too. Quintus Mucius and Aulus Ophelius stayed on a negative position, saying that only millstones would be considered. In Publius Rutilius Rufus, contemporary to them, saved the wood and the coal only when not destined to be sold. Sextus Cecilius Africanus, belonging to the Antonine period, and Salvius Julianus' beloved pupil, decided to consider as object of the particular kind of bequest also the inches and the candles. But which was the glue between all these elements, included even the millstones? The glue evidently was the worship of the Lari, the family gods of the house, wood and coal to light and keep the fire, the incense and the candles to offer aroma and illumination, finally millstones, called in Latin mole, from which the Italian verb immolare, to sacrifice, to prepare the floor for the holy bread. So the legatus penus was established in order to create a jumble of consumable things unified into a precise purpose. That is to say, that one to guarantee the worship of the Lari after the death of the decuius, normally the paterfamilias. And it is relevant that among all these things, we found exactly the ancients. The fact that a family institute and belonging to the inheritance law used also during the time of the Respublica, but having an archaic origin, imagines that the presence of the incense is a proof of its deep diffusion as luxury god connected with the religion in Roman society. So a very old use of this luxury god. Good. Anyway, the matter of the bequest and more in general of the inheritance recalls several times the world of the vegetal fragrances. There is nothing for the root of balsam in the digesta, but for example, arome, the root arome, together with odor and unguent are testified many times in the digesta. So the second fragment is preserved always in the digesta in 39.4.16.7 and comes from the Liber Singularis, the Delatoribus of Aelius Marcianus. There is not a translation of this passage because you see is only a list of precious goods, precious products. It is a famous tariff used probably in Alexandria and belonging to the time of Marcus Aurelius. It represents a list of precious gods coming from the east, all capable to be submitted to the vectigal, which was the import tax amounting to the fourth part of the whole quantity of product. The possibility that it could be an example of the vectigal mari rubri is excluded by the presence of goods having an African origin. Like in order to remain surrounded by our smoked fragrances, the laser, another resin taken from a plant called Laserpitium. And someone anyway say that this source could be an evidence even of the Portorium Italia. I don't think so. I think the tariff of Alexandria is concerning the East trade. The list, which has produced a remarkable historiography, has no order, as you can see, and confuses spices, stones, tissues, animals, and other precious things. Among the spices, we have the Cassia Turiana, the Xylocassia, and the Smyrna. While the third one is simply a mixture of myrrh, and the second one is bark from Cassia, better known as Chinese cinnamon, the first one is interesting because it seems to be a little bit more mysterious because of the presence of the adjective Turiana, Cassia Turiana, which could remember the Latin term for incense, precisely as we have seen tus turis. However, a Byzantine tradition of the passage placed into a collection of fiscal law preserved in the Codex Zaborda 121, where the Greek translation of the Cassia Turiana is Cassia I Kuriane, does not help us because it's based on a mistake of reading and copying. So the T becomes the K. For sure, would be strange that an absence of the frankincense in such a list of foreign products coming from the East trade market. The passage, as we have just said, is taken from a single book of Marcianus on the delatores. Subjects was supported the publicani against the fiscal frauds. The penalty concerning the evaded import taxes was the so-called commissum, that is to say, the confiscation of the goods of the merchants. It must be read together with the Digestum 39.4.16.6, the previous fragment, which evokes a constitution, most likely a rescript, issued by Marcus Aurelius and Commodus in order to simplify the duties of the functionaries. So the divine Marcus and Commodus answered to not accuse a publicanus who had not informed the merchant outside the law. His duty would be only to not mislead who asked what to do. Moreover, on the same trajectory, Digestum 39.4.16.5, exposing a rule in turn remounting even to Adrian and prescribing that ignorantia legis non excusat. So the divine Adrian decided that nothing would change concerning who had affirmed to ignore the law. Finally, the third source is represented by a constitution issued by Theodosius I together with the sons Arcadius and Honorius on the 8th November 292 in Constantinople, and which is possible to read in Codex Theodosianus 1610-12. You have the translation on the handout of the Constitution. So the Constitution concerns the ban in worshipping the pagan gods and prescribed in the Principium, as prescribed in the Principium, wherein a partition seems to be made between public and private worship. The first one represented by the rite of the sacrifice, and the second one by the offer of fires and fragrances, mainly just incense. The ban to sacrifice was safeguarded, as we read in the first paragraph, by the capital punishment in accordance with the fact that it was considered a crimen publicum of high treason because of its final intention to investigate the future, eventually the future of the emperor too, through the study of the offal of the victims. For the subjects simply attending to the sacrifice, so the penalty was prescribed in 25 pounds of fine gold, is written in the third paragraph, while for potential connivences of judges and functionaries, the sum was of 30 pounds of fine gold, the fourth paragraph. So a kind of legal rule, general legal rule. The ban to offer incense to images, imagines, and status simulacra instead was safeguarded by the confiscation of the place where the aroma has been burnt. The second paragraph instead is interesting in particular for a kind of process of overturning concerning the so-called purificatio. Sure enough, the practice to burn a part of a granule of incense was one of the requirements imposed by the legislation promoted by Decius and Valerianus during the persecutions against the Christians in 250 and 257-58. It is known that the text of the edicts did not survive, but we have in particular the testimony left by Cyprian of Carthage, who faced the ecclesiastical problem concerning the so-called lapsi, the Christians who had preferred to pay homage to the emperor rather than to die. Among them, sacrificati, who had made sacrifice, libellatici, who had obtained the libellum, and traditores, who had consigned, given the Holy Scriptures, the turificati, past participle of the verb turificare, were called the Christians who had chosen to offer the incense to the emperor in order to save their lives. So, in the new order of the confessional state created by Theodosius, what has been an instrument of salvation just 1 century before became a reason of sentence, of death sentence. This kind of confusion in using the incense both for paganism and for Christianity appears in Tertullianus Apologeticum 42:7. And Tertullianus says that we absolutely refrain from buying incense. If the Arabians complain, let the Sabaeans know that their wares are used in a greater quantity and a greater cost for the burial of Christians than for the fumigating of gods. So it is a poetic, of course, poetic language of Tertullianus. Could be useful just to remember that the Byzantine time would be characterized by a great use of incense for the worship of the icons and more in general for the Orthodox rituals. And this such a great use continued during the period of the iconoclasm too. Absolutely similar is to this constitution of Theodosius the Great is the constitution issued in 451 and addressed to the Prefectus Praetorio of the East, Palladius, by the Emperor Marcianus. And we can read this constitution in Codex 1.11.7, where we read the Principium, and it is not useful to translate it because it's quite the same of the previous constitution. So, conclusion. It is clear that the argument of the frankincense trade implies some general matters of Roman history, as the history of commerce, the import tax system, and the relations with foreign populations, in our case, the Arabs, and on consequence, the so-called limes forschung. Moreover, it must be put in connection with its social function, that is to say, a religious one. On consequence, many interesting things could be said about the worship given to the gods through the aromatic smoke of the fragrance coming from the south, because the incense is firm, rather white, and rises upward to the sky. It is also inebriating, but mainly it purifies the spaces from the smells. In Yemenite and Omanite houses, is still used in the morning to throw away the stink of the night. Coming from far away, the frankincense was really expensive, and it must be considered a luxury good, as we have already said many times. A luxury good, its import was regulated by a tax system, which increased the final price. And of course, such a high price was justified by the use, which concerned both pagan and Christian religion. So, as it happens for the Silk Roads, the frankincense one becomes a kind of meta-historic concept, and in the meantime, an authentic interpretation key for the whole Roman history, because it is something widespreading across the time and the space. I have 1 minute, yeah? Yes. We have seen, thanks to the three sources analyzed, that our ancients crossed the Res Publica, the Principatum, and the Dominatum, arriving to the Byzantine era. In the same way, it crossed the desert of Arabia and the waters of the Red Sea to reach the caravan cities of Petra and Gaza, and the harbor of Berenice, Myosormos, and finally Leuke Kome. The protagonist is always the frankincense, which put in communication people, languages, ideas, and cultures. For this reason, the legal studies of the history of trade, concerning especially a luxury good as the frankincense was, must have a multidisciplinary approach in order to achieve useful scientific results. The historical and economic environment to be studied is perfectly represented by the Nabatean cities of the Negev desert, Avdat, Shifta, Mamshit, and Alusa, quoted at the beginning of my speech. And this is a trajectory followed, it seems to me, by the Israeli archaeology. And I've quoted some very interesting articles. And on this trajectory, we will continue along this road. So I have finished.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have time for some questions? One question, just one question to anyone. Maybe someone here.
Or also online. Say what? Okay. Mirav has a question.
Merav, please.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm